article I wrote back in 1987, the whole point of that was that emotional intelligence isn't the same as intelligence. It's not something you can pin down, that you can quantify in the same way. And at that time, I actually sort of I stopped doing work on it because I didn't want to be drawn down this quantification route. And in fact, it's only comparatively recently I've come back into it. And that is when I can see that there is a genuine interest in embracing emotional intelligence, not as a quantifiable personality trait, but as a way of thinking, a way of behaving, as a form of consciousness. And I think when you look at how we've been promoting this event, this consciousness, this integrating emotional intelligence with personality, with the evolution of consciousness, that's when we start to make real progress with it.
Very well said to both of you. I wanted to confirm one thing. So John had asked in the chat, Bre, who Maslow was inspired by, and I think it was the Blackfoot Nation. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Just confirm. So let's move to the next question. In what ways do you both see EQ being applied favorably in today's society? And in what ways might it be applied with manipulation in mind?
Okay, after you.
I'm gonna take my time with this one because I think I have something in mind, but I want to chew over it for a minute. So if you have some ideas, or if anybody else has some ideas,
Okay.
that's great too.
So, well, I think now post-pandemic, in the sense of mental health, particularly mental health at work. And as soon as we start being aware that individuals, employees, colleagues, students, whatever, are really struggling through anxiety brought on during this pandemic, then that forces us to question whether we're really taking other people's feelings seriously. And one way of doing that, when we're engaging in personal self-development, professional development, is to bring in emotional intelligence and asking how can we help, how can we encourage and enable people as they're growing professionally, as they're growing personally, to address this personal side of things. That's one answer. Did you want to respond on that first, Bre? Or the other thing I wanted to comment on was this question of manipulation, which was a very particular part of a question, which again, I've got a different perspective on.
Yeah,
But did you
please
want to
go on. No,
respond
go
to that
on.
first?
Go on. This is great. Go ahead.
So yeah, I'm not sure I would go along with manipulation in the sense that we normally think. So manipulation to me means with a prior intent to use people, to get people to do something you don't want to. I think where emotional intelligence has been misapplied or misused in the past has purely been because people haven't really understood it. So my perception is that well-meaning managers, well-meaning organizations have said, oh, yeah, this sounds good. We really want to be part of this. And they've introduced it as part of their professional development, for example. But they've done so as yet another box-ticking exercise. And by doing that, they've totally misunderstood what it's about. They've gone in thinking that they can tackle emotional intelligence like they do any procedural matter, and they totally failed. So that's not manipulation. That's a little bit more subtle than that. But no, it hasn't really been working, and it's about time that changed. And approaching things from a consciousness angle, I think, is the way forward.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up for me is something that I was thinking about in the beginning, which is this idea of, like, when I think about workplaces and workplace perks, this idea of tapping into what we think employees will really enjoy and really want to come to a place to work for is really just a facade to get people to either stay there longer or feel like I really have a good thing going, right? You got free coffee, free kombucha, you've got a basketball hoop, you've got endless free snacks, all of these things that you're in your mind as you're searching for a job, you're already searching for some place of belonging. So by having these come out and saying like, we're offering all of this and we have endless, we value mental health and we have all of these things, and yet after your second or third week, you're having meetings during a lunchtime, you're having working meetings, right? Or you're getting together as a group after 5 o'clock and it's team building. But is that really taking into account our emotional well-being? No, right? It's not, because we should know better. We should know that part of being emotionally healthy is also being alone and being solo and not having a group and having a separation from eating lunch and working, especially if you're eating lunch within your office, which happens all the time, right? We're eating in just a group setting, but we're still in the office making jokes about some of the things that we did at work. But if you separate that and you actually enjoy that, you have time with your food, you're mindfully eating, you're now taking a break from actually thinking about work, being in the setting of work. And I think that when Angie, you bring up the word manipulation, I think to myself, I'm thinking, well, that seems manipulative. That seems to me that people are saying, we know that this is so important to you. We know that having free snacks and we know all of these things are so important. Let us offer it to you. Let us as a company take the sacrifice and offer it free to you at that. And in return, we expect you to work very tedious, very long hours. We may even potentially say hey, you're going to get promoted because you're doing all this work. And it actually just means that you're just getting more work. So I just think that in ways like that, when we're trying to sneakily say, we know this will make somebody more joyous or more happy or feel like they belong to something, we're not actually doing that. In fact, I think that we're pushing more anxiety and depression, and I think we're pushing more of that on when we do things like that, in my opinion.
Absolutely. No, I totally go along with all of that. And yeah, oh, right. So if that's what you mean by manipulation, then yes, I get that. And that is a real problem. Can I give the a counter? And that is that some organizations do seem to be aware of it at a deeper, more meaningful level. So beside my emotional intelligence and Reiki work, I do work full time in the University of Bristol here in the UK. Where within my role, I'm a mental health champion. And when lockdown started, there was a genuine concern of the extra pressure that it was putting staff under. And we, the mental health champions, said, hang on a minute, we want you, the senior management, to help staff to appreciate that it's okay to take time out for yourself and for your emotional well-being. And to give them credit, they said, yes, absolutely, you're right. And so we ran a whole series for 6 months, I think it was, called It's Okay To. And individuals would post their own idea as to what it was okay to do to bring emotional life, social life, real human connections into our day-to-day working lives. And it was things like, it's okay to call a colleague just to ask them how they are. It's okay to go out into the kitchen and have a dance in between meetings. It's okay to just do nothing for a few moments. It's okay. It's okay to. And that was the general message, that recognizing the pressure that the situation, everybody working from home, all the extra pressure because of COVID was putting on us all in the university, that we needed to know that it was okay to feel anxious about it. It was okay to feel pressured by it and to admit it. And the campaign went down really well, and everybody did feel that it was just nice to feel that we could do these things, that we could admit, and it was okay.
I love that. And I do agree with you. There are places that are doing it meaningfully and intentionally, and I do appreciate those places. I think too, one thing that comes to mind is individuals using their emotional intelligence to support their communities. And I think that that is really something that I've seen a lot working in Bayview. And now I'm looking at John because John has a super awesome, and I might actually call you out, John, if you don't mind, but he has a way of showing up for the people in Bayview that was thinking about where they were coming from and thinking about the skills that they had and the things that they enjoy and what he could do with that and all of that information and to make his community a better place. Do you mind, John, just telling us briefly about Boombox? I just think it's so cool.
Thank you, Bre. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, I moved to the Bayview area about 10 years ago. If anyone's not familiar with Bayview, it has of social trauma and violence and teenagers who lack opportunities and healthy role models and mentors. But in Bayview about 10 years ago, I discovered that kids in this neighborhood are just brilliant. Hello, can you hear me?
There you go. You're breaking up for a minute.
Okay, I'm not sure where I left out, but so yeah, when I started working with teenagers in the neighborhood about 10 years ago, I discovered that they're just brilliant and filled with creativity and enthusiasm, and so I wanted to give them the same kind of opportunities that I had as a kid growing up. I mean, my dad taught me how to work with tools, and I know that, and I think this really brings up a really important factor, which is that in my opinion, working with tools is a very therapeutic activity. It's very meditative. Um, the world just sort of goes away, and you become sort of engrossed in what you're building and making, and of course, when people have technical skills, that can create economic opportunities. So it just seemed like, in so many different ways, a great recipe. However, I also knew that kids won't participate if they're not really excited about the activity, and so I felt that I had to engage them in building something that they really wanted to build. Which is boom boxes, because Bayview is all about music and beats, and you won't go to a community event or a picnic or even a political rally, any kind of activity in Bayview. There's going to be a DJ and a big sound system, and so I felt that it was really important. I mean, of course, kids all over the world are crazy about music, but it seemed like an especially right fit for this neighborhood. And so the whole program is based around building boom boxes. So it's intended to, find this intersection between cultural relevance and opportunity and mindfulness.
That is
that
why I
answers your
brought you in.
question.
No, that was perfect. That is why I brought it in, was just to show the emotional intelligence that was required on your part to design a program that would allow the community to feel welcomed and to feel like you were really had their best interest in mind, instead of coming in and saying that you needed something completely different, but it was good for a different culture or a different district. And so that's where I think that EQ has really been used for the greater good in a lot of places. So
Thank you, Bre.
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds like a great time to transition into the concept of intuitive design. And before we do so, I had one thought come to me during the discussion around how EQ can be applied well versus potentially manipulatively. And the concept of positive psychology came up for me. Not that positive psychology is wrong, but I do think there's many organizations who are latching on to the concepts and like, oh, this is easy. This is a quick fix. This is a way I can make money by just creating an app with positive psychology tips. And I think that frame of mind can be very toxic in ways. So just that was something that came to mind. And on the topic of intuitive design, first, I just wanted to throw it out there, especially to you, Dr. Beasely. What are your thoughts about this as a concept?
Well, I think before I answer that as a question, I'd like to give a bit of background in terms of my background in technology. So for 17 years, I worked in a research and development lab for the research and development of silicon chips. And I was actually the quality and reliability engineer on the design of the codec for the UK's first digital telephone exchange. So this was way before any of the digital telephony and systems that we know now. This was one of the pioneering bits of technology. And I was on the team that designed some of the silicon chips for it. And in those days where I worked, it was the forefront of technology. It was an amazing place to work, just so vibrant with this design creativity and really wanting to push back the understanding of the science, but to use it for worthwhile things that humanity needed. Fine, brilliant. Anyway, a few years later, our company was subject to a hostile takeover bid. And eventually they succeeded. New company came in, they brought the accountants in, and before too long, the heart and soul had just gone from this company. Instead of this vibrant research environment where the creativity of the design people and the innovators was valued, it was all bottom line profit, nothing else mattered. And my heart sunk. And that was one reason I got out. The other reason I got out was that I went to a meeting looking at some of the technological developments that were happening at the time. So this was in the early 1990s. So this was when a mobile phone was like a brick, okay? You know, these really big, heavy, very original mobile phones. And we were talking about some of the underlying technology, surface mount technology, how you took the silicon chip and inserted it in your bit of kit. And they were saying, well, we think the driver for this technology is a mobile phone on your wrist, which we now have as commonplace. But in those days, this was unbelievably far thinking. And rather than being encouraged by this, it made my heart sink. And the reason for that is because I thought, well, do we actually need a phone on the wrist? And what I could see happening was that rather than a technology being driven by a genuine need and genuine research to push back science, it was beginning to be driven by profit. And that was it. I got out. That's when I left electronics and went into holistic health and Reiki healing. So I think that probably answers the question. So yeah, I think in terms of getting emotional intelligence into technology, it's going back to really, so it's not the pace of which it's changing, it's what is the intent behind it. If our intent, so no, John's example again was wonderful, and I very much supported it. But you were there, aware of that community, you knew what the community needed. They needed to be in there making their own music, and you were able to help them do it. It was not technology-led, it was not profit-led, it was community-led, and that's emotionally intelligent. And I think to me that's what it's all about. Let's cut through the bottom line profits and the intended goals, and say, well, what is in it for the individuals? What is they, as thinking, feeling human beings who've got feelings, who want to feel they belong, who want to feel part of their community, what's in it at that level? And if we're not addressing that question, I'm not sure we're being emotionally intelligent at all. Over to you.
Yeah,
I just wanted to respond, if I may.
of course.
Thank you, John. Yes.
Yeah, I'm so glad you put it that way, Keith, because people are inclined to think of my project as a technology project, but it's actually the technology is just a path. It's a tool. It's a youth development program. It's an emotional development program, and it's also an economic development program, because for this community, economic development is a very essential component of healing and opportunity. One of the issues for young people is they sense a lack of economic opportunity, and that affects their psychology. It affects them emotionally.
Absolutely, that's good. No, I like that. And again, it's acknowledging that technology is a tool, and the finance is again another essential tool. So you need it, but it's as an enabler, not as a end in itself. And it's interesting. I may be preempting a previous question here, but something you may see. I've got a sweatshirt which is Reiki on it. And one of the issues when you're teaching Reiki is, what about charging for your Reiki treatment? So this issue of finance is actually a big one when you're talking about emotional intelligence, is how do you see money? And this is a major topic when I'm teaching Reiki, particularly if people wanting to go and earn money out of their Reiki or the therapeutic practice. And so the purists would say, oh, Reiki, it's a healing energy, anyone can do it, doesn't cost anything, Reiki's free, which may be true, but the time and attention of me, the practitioner, is not free. I've got bills to pay. And so there is this very strong idea that money is just an energy, and it's an energy which you can interchange for technology, you can interchange for someone's time, you can interchange for someone's contribution to society. And so I'm quite happy if someone wants to do some Reiki training with me, if they can't afford to pay me in pounds or dollars, if they bring along a sack of potatoes, I am more than happy. If they want to give me a reflexology treatment in exchange, I'm more than happy. And again, I think this getting rising above this be all and end all bottom line dollar enabler. It's part of this bigger interconnection of all things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I like that both of you brought up something which I've been preaching a lot lately, which is that technology isn't the solution. Technology scales this solution. And that for me was really important to understand, especially when I was seeing all of these mental health apps come up. Because as Angie shared, when we first started this work, there were maybe 3 or so. There wasn't a lot of this of mental health tech going on. And now it's huge. And I still don't know with some of them what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And I understand that some of it makes sense to me, and this brings us back to this idea of intuitive design. But I don't think that it's intuitive. Mental health apps, I don't think they're intuitive, because I don't think services are intuitive. I think products can be intuitive. And so when I think of intuitive design, I just want to say, no, it's intuitive product design. That's it. Like, it should just be intuitive product design, because I should know when I open up my laptop where the enter key is, where the space key is. I should know when I get a new coffee maker, how to open it, how to turn it on. I should know those things, but that's a product. And the buttons are what allow me to know exactly where to go. The colors are what allow me to know where the off button is. So different things like that allow me to know exactly what my experience should be and how I have that experience. But a service is not like that. When we go into mental health and we go into therapy, for example, for the first time, especially from a culture where we're not trusting therapy, where we've never had therapy, where having these conversations don't exist with another stranger in a couch in a room. They exist within our grandmothers, they exist outside on a bench with friends, they exist in church. So when we come to this idea of therapy or a service like that, similar to Reiki, it's not intuitive because it shouldn't be intuitive. Because how is it that I'm supposed to know exactly what experience Karen is supposed to have when she comes into my office? How am I supposed to know exactly what experience I want when I go into my therapist's office, when all I see is a couch and walls and some very cool flowers or plants? I still don't know in my own self, in my own body, what experience I want to have. How can she know? And so to design something that is not intuitive and to say that we're going to do intuitive design for a mental health app, that doesn't make sense to me. In fact, quite frankly, I don't like it. And I just want to say, nope, that does not work. It doesn't work for me because you can't design something that is not in itself intrinsically intuitive. And services intrinsically are not intuitive because it's an experience that we bring already our own experience to that experience. So how on earth can I know what I'm supposed to do? Do I know when I go to the UK how to turn on a coffee pot? I'm sure I'll figure it out. Yeah. Will I know how to do that when I go to Africa? Of course, I'm sure I'll figure it out. Indonesia, when I go visit CT, sure, I'll figure it out because it's an intuitive design, but it's a product. If I go to therapy in India, I'm going to have no clue what to expect. If I have Reiki in the UK versus Reiki here in the United States, they're probably going to be somewhat similar. But is it intuitive that I know, okay, I need to take my shoes off and I need to lay flat and I need to keep my eyes closed? No, that's not intuitive for me. And so I don't like the idea of intuitive design just being kind of generally thrown out there. I like the idea of intuitive product design, but when we start to think about intuitive design for services, I don't like it. I don't like it. I'm not there yet.
Me neither. And with Dr. J and I had already had this discussion a few days ago and totally agreed that the whole idea was just wrong, because it's that intuition comes from within, and intuition is something you apply yourself in a given situation. How can someone design it to be intuitive for someone else? It just, to me, it's another example of where the marketing people have taken a very good idea, a very good word, and they have used it as a marketing tool, as a marketing gimmick, without really understanding it, and in so doing, actually devalued it. And that's not an emotionally intelligent thing to do, unfortunately. So we're agreed on that one.
Yeah.
But maybe it leads for discussion to, if we're talking about intuition, is it possible, might some of you there develop an app which helps people to develop their own intuition? And how about that? How would that work?
I do
Is that
think that's
possible?
done in some ways. Just to kind of shed light on my understanding of the psychedelic preparation and integration apps when healing for trauma, depression, anxiety, and substance use. There are starting to come out with apps that will help you psychologically, physically prepare for these psychedelic experiences before you do your medicine session. And it's largely rooted in inner directed healing, which is intuitive healing. So that is something that's starting to be created.
Okay, well, I'd certainly be interested to keep in touch on that.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that bothers me a lot about these other technological apps that monitor your various bodily rhythms and so on, and that is the idea that an app and lots of people using it can tell you your overall state of well-being just by monitoring one simple pulse rate or heart rate or whatever. That to me is very scary, and again an unintelligent thing to do, because I know, my sense of well-being, how I'm feeling at this moment, is dependent on numerous different, bodily functions and states of mind and aspects of myself. And yes, I trust someone who is a natural healer or is an empath or is intuitive to be able to pick up on how I'm feeling. And so any of you watching, if you are empathic and you tune into me, you could probably have a good hazard a guess as to how I'm feeling. But some bit of technology, just using one or two sensors, can actually offer that as a bit of valid information. I find of great concern, I have to say.
Mm. Wonderful.
Anybody like to respond to that one?
This is a very fruitful conversation so far, and I want to stick with this topic, but go a little bit deeper and just thinking about what concerns we might have about the rate at which products and services are being developed. Are we developing too quickly for EQ and intuition to be appropriately incorporated?
I have some notes. What did I say?
Oh, and while you're thinking, one addition, I just wanted to say that we do end at 10:15 Pacific time, 1:15 Eastern time, just for a check-in. Go ahead, Dr. Beasely.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure it's the rate per se, so long as what I said before is taken into account. So long as it's introduced for the right reason, so long as there is this question as, do we actually need this? Is this helping us as thinking, feeling human beings? Is it helping us to connect? Then so long as those questions are being asked, then the emotional intelligence can be brought in answering those questions. And we can't stop it. We can't slow it down anyway, can we? I think the rate of change is where we're at. And okay, let me put a different answer to this question. My thesis, my PhD thesis, was about transcending that we humanity are evolving in our consciousness. So my perception is that technology is feeding into the consciousness evolution, in that it is giving us a sense that we are all interconnected through the internet. It is giving us a sense that life is evolving. So we're evolving technologically, and that is bringing us closer together, particularly through the pandemic and so on. So my sense is that the technological evolution, yes, speeding up, and it's got to come to an end at some point. But as it does, then our personal inner, deeper consciousness evolution will take over from it.
I am thinking I'm thinking specifically about Anne right now, and if you're comfortable sharing a little bit about like what space you occupy these days. And I'm thinking about how quickly some things can happen in your industry. Do you mind sharing a bit about where you are?
Sure, happy to. So hi everyone, my name's Anne. I actually met Angie during my time at X2AI as well, and Angie had introduced me to Dr. G. I think the original question that Angie had posed around, products and services or whatnot being created and then iterated at a faster rate than perhaps the owners, the products are ready to really take ownership for is really interesting. I think the intention is always there. The intention is always good, and it is to help more people to produce and improve on a technology that we hope can make a difference in people's lives. I think for me personally, it's been a really interesting learning experience because there's always trade-offs that need to happen. And when you have competing priorities or trade-offs that then sort of hinge on the question of, we can take a shortcut and know that it's going to be okay and probably do well, but the long term is definitely not going to be the sustainable or scalable or maybe most ethical solution. Do we still go with that path forward? And so I don't know. I don't think that there is a clear black and white answer. And for me, when I see a lot of companies out there that are doing, I guess, on balance, more good than harm, like it's really hard to say what that can look like. I think I'm still very optimistic about the space, and that with the right leadership and the right safeguards in place, you have, at X2, Angie had created an ethical board for our company. When you have the right people in the room talking through pros and cons, benefits, disadvantages, and really being thoughtful about it, I think that there is a lot of good and hope that can continue to come from that.
Thanks. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because she's a really great example, and Omkar, you're next, because you're the other second great example of the two competing things that will always be racing emotional intelligence, or I guess will always be blowing past emotional intelligence, which is one, the rate at which CEOs and founders and creators want to push these things out, right? They want to push them out, not always because they want to do good super fast. Sometimes it's because they want to push it out to get to the next round of seed funding, and that's that. And I agree, most of the time it works out that the benefits do outweigh the harm. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is data science that is always, you always need to find out, right? We always need to find out more. We need to research. And in order to do the research, you have to have the data pool. You have to have the numbers. You have to have a pool. And so I feel like sometimes, in my experience, slowing down to be intentful, to be really thoughtful about what is the emotional side of all of this. I'm gonna be battling, and no offense to these beautiful people, Anne and Omkar, I love both of you, but I'm battling CEOs and creators, and I'm battling data science because it's a pace difference, right? And so I do think that as much as I would like to say EQ is not able to stop the process of things being created, I do think that the more conversations we have like this, the more people see posts about emotional intelligence, about without using the word slow down, because when you hear the word slow down, as a researcher myself, when I hear the word slow down, I can't slow down because I have a deadline, one. Two, if I slow down, everything else that goes along with it gets slowed down, and that's going to make for a really dirty data set, and nobody likes dirty data. So you got to just keep going. So I think that's really intentional about how we have these conversations about EQ, which is not saying slow down. That's going to scare so many people away. And it's also about talking about what it actually means, right? Engagement. People love the word engagement. Okay, what does engagement actually mean? Does it mean getting people to use the app lots and lots of times? Yes. Does it mean people coming to your website lots and lots of times? Yes. But what does that mean, right? What are you focused on? And once you can answer that question with an emotional, lens, at least, what does that mean? What are you focused on? You can start asking the question, okay, what does this mean? And then once you've asked the question, what does this mean? You say, what am I going to do about it? Right? And so I think that if we can do those three things with creators, it's just enough time for us to get them to slow down without saying slow down, but it's just enough time for us to say, okay, what are you really focused on? And what exactly does that mean? And then what are you going to do about it? And I think even with data science, it's a beautiful thing to say that, because we are always focused on something, right? We always want to have outputs and outcomes. That's a big thing. We got to find that out. But what is the actual focus under that outcome or that output? What exactly does that mean? And what are we going to do about it? So I think it's a way of talking about it without scaring people and without making creators feel like they are halted, and without, scientists making them feel like we're throwing something in there that can't be operationally defined. Please don't throw anything in there that we can't operationally define, because it's going to throw us all out. How can we quantify something that we don't know? So I think we have to start quantifying what emotional intelligence means. It means engagement. It means clicks. It means, right? Like that's what it means. And so I think that part, at least for me, I feel like that is my responsibility in the space that I occupy, is operationally defining some tenets of emotional intelligence and bridging that gap.
Absolutely, yeah. Engagement is the key word there, but again, that's another word which all too often has been used without really understanding what it's about. So yes, it's engaging at the technological level, but it's engaging at the level of fellow human beings. Another useful way of helping understand what we're looking for here, I think, so you use the word integration and data sets, and that is to make sure you get a balance between the quantitative data and the qualitative data. So not just the figures, but what's underlying the figures in terms of what individuals are feeling, what individuals are needing at a deeper, more emotional level. Yeah.
Yeah. We used to be on this really big like quant surge. And I think now, thanks to, a boom with DEI and inclusive design and inclusive research, we're starting to focus a little bit more on qualitative. But I still feel when I am in conversations that I have to advocate for qualitative research as being evidence-based. What more can I get that's more evidence-based than somebody's actual experience? So it's still not there, though. I'm still very much trying to, like I said, to advocate for qualitative research, which is just, it gets tiring, but it's something that I will carry on as long as I need to, because without that piece, it's going to be missing a large part of like what we're talking about, of that, this emotional intelligence into research. So thank you for bringing that up.
If I can throw something else in here which may help. Some of you may have heard of the Galileo Commission. If you haven't, look it up. It's an international network collaboration of all sorts of scientists from across disciplines, across nations, and they are saying that we need to extend science, that we need to balance quantitative data and qualitative data, but how people are feeling and experiencing something is just as valid and important a bit of evidence as that which you can measure. Yeah, Galileo Commission, do look them up and do support them, and do use them in your papers and evidence to encourage your CEOs to get qualitative.
I love that. Yeah, I went ahead and put that in the chat if you guys want to check it out.
One question that came up for me as you were all speaking is, who needs to be involved? Who should organizations be hiring and seeking for guidance and support to make their products and services more emotionally intelligent or intuitive?
Phew. There's a really big part of me that's like, psychologists. I mean, really, like, but the thing is that within the psychology world, and I put this in my most recent post, you get in there and you are already on a track to be a psychologist, a clinician, to either serve with clinical populations, to either be in a clinic or in your own private practice. Not once did I have a conversation from the very beginning of like, what if you want to work in tech? Like, I never got that until I got like well into it, and I was like, this sucks. Therapy is not for me. I'm a terrible clinician, and it's not because I can't do active listening or anything like, or reflection or anything like that. It's really because I don't like it. I'm not interested in holding that space. There are people out there who do it beautifully, and I really am, I thank you for that, because I needed my own therapist. But what I'm really good at doing is holding space for all of the things that aren't thought about. So when you make an app and you're putting a button here and you're putting all this verbiage, and I'm like, wait, this is for a busy mom. You're making this app for a busy mom, and you want the button to be at the top. We're holding a child or a pot or something. The button needs to be over here on the bottom left. Like, you got to put it there, right? So just tiny little things that you people don't think about. There was another one that I was working on where it was something about gun violence, and they were just talking about it in the page before, and then the next page, the button was so let's take your best shot or something. And I was like, whoa, that's not going to work. You're just talking about gun violence, and then over here you're like, let's take your best shot. That doesn't mix. And I don't think that designers catch those things, because that's not where their eye is trained. Their eye is trained for buttons, circles rather than squares, right? Fonts, making things accessible, making things be visually accessible, things like that. But where we're lacking is when we talk about emotional intelligence, there has to be somebody in there that can talk about it from a theoretical point of view with whatever jargon of the industry that they're in. So what I found was coming to a nonprofit and talking about our families as users, that was not going to cut it, right? Like, everyone was like, oh, they're not users, they're our families, right? But they are users of our services, right? Like, they get an email, they get a pamphlet, they get a follow-up, like that's all part of their experience. So I had to come in there with the same like goal, which was to make it so that we could come into a community where we had lost trust and say, we're back and you can trust us, and here's why. And I had to say that in a way that was like, these are families, these are community members, we let them down, we started something and we totally fell off, like we have to come back in and we have to restore trust. But if I go to the board members and say that, they're going to be like, okay, well, how long is that going to take, and what is the budget, like, do we need to get grants for this, right? And so it's just like very off-putting, and you can be very much you can feel hopeless after a lot of those conversations. But if you come in with the jargon of, yes, we need to have a grant because we need to hold listening sessions, and we're going to hold these listening sessions, and that's because we want people to be able to come in and just talk, and we're going to hold these listening sessions, and we're not calling them in-depth interviews because that's really what they are, but I'm not going to call them that. And yes, we do need to grant, we do need to fundraise for this. And so you're speaking their language. And so I think that every company is going to be different. And I think when you're in a larger company like Google, for example, I would have no idea who to go to have this conversation. It would probably live within me and within my capabilities. But what I was able to do while I was there was, when I did a particular study, it was on benchmarking on keyboards. And so people were checking out different keyboards. And every time they used the Google keyboard, they were like, I feel stupid. I don't know why I'm so bad at typing right now. And I thought that that was a really big piece of information. Yes, the Apple keyboard was better quantitatively. Yes, we knew all of that. But when I had my opportunity to give my study, or to give my findings, I said, this is what's going on. The Apple keyboard is definitely better, and here's why: spacing, shape of key, blah, blah, blah. But also, our keyboard is making people feel stupid. Like, that was a big piece of information for me. Well, how did you know that? Oh, because they were telling me that. And how could I quantify that? I couldn't, right? Because that was not part of the template that I got. So that's really important to me, though, is that this project is actually making somebody feel like on the J curve, if you guys are familiar with the J curve of competency, that they have now taken steps back, that they are no longer competent in keyboards and keyboard typing because of this product. That is a really big deal to me. And so I think in some companies, they'll be able to do something about it. And other companies, there's not a lot you can do. If I was on that design team for the keyboards, I would probably on my own say, like, hey, let's put the space bar here, and let's make it so that if you press it hard enough, you can use it as a cursor. just like the Apple keyboard, and people won't feel stupid, right? So I'd be able to put in my own things to kind of make it better, so to speak. But if I don't have that, if I live just in the research world, which at Google I did, I was just in the research world, I was not in design, I couldn't cross both paths, I don't know what I can do. And I think that brings up a really good point, Angie, is that if a company and it's small enough and you're able to say, like, this is what we stand for emotional intelligence, it's going to be really important to make sure that every team understands what that means for their team. Like, for design, it means this. For research, it means this. For fundraising, it means this. Everybody can put it in there. It's not like DEI work where it only lives in like human resources, for example, and then it's kind of spread out. It's like, no, everybody can be well-versed in emotional intelligence, everybody, and you can take it outside of your work. And so I think that that's where I'm going when I think about who needs to be involved. My heart says everybody.
Oh, what a wonderful answer. Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. Totally agree. And to really just to follow that up and give another hopefully useful tip on that as to how to go about that. What you're saying there about feeling stupid using that keyboard, the first thing you've got to do before you can design a better one is to allow people to express their frustration at that. And I don't know if you've heard of Marshall Rosenberg. He wrote up some books on nonviolent communication. And the whole gist of his view was whether you're trying to bring peace in the Middle East, peace in your home, or emotional intelligence into a workplace, before you can solve a problem, be it technological or whatever, you've got to allow those involved to express how they are feeling. That's the first bottom line of emotional intelligence, really, isn't it? Is to listen, to ask people who you're trying to help. And if someone is really off with a keyboard, then you want to know that before you can design a better one.
Yeah.
Very good points. I'm going to drop in the chat the Nonviolent Communication book by Marshall Rosenberg. Thank you, Dr. Beasely, for sharing that. I want to open it up to the group here in our final 9 minutes or so, just to ask, what questions, what comments, also just how are you feeling about this conversation and what has come up for you throughout the last hour?
Have we stunned you to silence?
Hi. Hello, I'm Siri. I'm from Indonesia. So this is my second time to join Dr. G's class. I found this seminar Eventbrite. Actually, during this hour, I think I found insightful about how we have to include emotional intelligence in making or creating something that is not really human, like something, because in Indonesia there's a lot of mobile app or like place for people to share their concern, to learn psychology, but it is actually not that interactive, like not all certified practitioner. Sometimes they just graduated from bachelor degree, undergraduate, or sometimes just random people who. So it's really not professional from my point of view, because it's not easy to help people just with by reading books, right? Like a lot of people love to read self-help books or self-development, but doesn't mean they understand how to engage, how to build relationships like that. And it is interesting for me to finally realize that it's not only just about user experience, it's about how deep, it's about how our mind thinks, because I used to work in an IT as well, just for a year, just as a project manager. And I don't think the work of the developers really understand human to the depth, to that deep place. Like, it just, yeah, they I'm agree with Dr. G. They just consider whether it is okay to have this experience, just like something it's easy, it's familiar, without really like make sure about the perception they have. So yeah, I think it's really, I think it's not the agree with Dr. G. It's not there yet. It's still far away to reach that goal, because I think in Indonesia it's still new. We are just like a developed country, so even UX UI, it just come like 2018 maybe or so. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, City.
Thank you.
If I may, I would like to go next. I think it was an amazing talk, and I would like to speak to a couple of points that I found most interesting. To Bree's point that everyone needs to be involved when we are developing a product. And I think psychologists would play a very important role in understanding the emotional impacts and the long-term impacts on the use of any product, you know. But on the other hand, it's the customer itself. And like, I have this sort of naive idea, not exactly naive, but I like to think that customers should be as intentional about the product as the employee who's working for creating the product. Like, I have this idea that customers would go in to work on the product, and their work is to use the product, you know. But I think giving them the power to not just give feedback, but ask questions as to why is it the way it is, you know. I think that is very reflective and very much, and I think that should be very much a part of the process of creating a product itself. Um, I think another thing that Dr. Keith spoke about was creating apps that help you develop your intuition, you know. And I thought about this interesting app that is still in development called Time Well Spent. And it's about how do we use all the apps on our phone and how do we intend to use them. So what it creates is an interactive interface wherein you get to set your expectations with those apps and how long you need it for. And it's all sort of helps you interact with those apps as you intend to. Like, suppose you spend some time on YouTube and you don't realize that you scrolled through like 3 hours of your day, and that is something that you don't enjoy at the end of it. So setting those expectations about those apps so that you can have a more comprehensive experience where you get to choose how you interact with those apps, you know, that you won't need any notifications till 10 in the morning once you've had your breakfast and had your coffee and things like those. So providing more autonomy and more tools to our users to interact with the product. And I think that's what my experience has been, fortunately having therapists, is that they don't solve my problems, but they give me the tools for me to understand them and solve them myself. So I think that is something that I resonated on and was interested to share.
Thank you, Omkar.
I'm with you, Omkar, on the users. I am a huge fan of getting folks who are going to be using the whatever to be part of the design, from the napkin all the way to the final product. I try to do that with our youth in Bayview when we're designing things for them. I get them involved from the very beginning, because what I think is a good idea, they may be like, nope, that's not going to work. I don't have time for that. I can't get to the bus on time, like whatever it is. So I really do feel like if we could open our doors more, if creators could open their doors more to customers, that there are customers out there who would love that opportunity to develop something from the ground up. We can't just get them with feedback surveys afterwards. Like, did you enjoy the product? Like, it's too late, but it's way too late by then. You've put in way too much money as the company to go back and to make any big changes. But if you would have started from the beginning, like, hey, we're thinking of doing these headphones where you can just go like this and turn up the volume. What do you think? Like, nope, I run with my hands like this. That's not going to work, right? So like if we would get people more involved and trust people, trust our customers as the experts, I think we would make things, and trust our users, trust our families, trust our community-based organizations, whoever we're working with. If we trusted them more, we would be able to get a better sense of what was actually needed. And when you know what people really need, that's when your engagement goes up. That's when you get clicks to your website. That's when you get people using your app all the time or whatever it is. I look at Karen. Karen knows exactly what her entrepreneur base needs. She knows them because she connects with them and she hears them. And then she hears us say, Karen, I really need a class about like social media for people who don't do social media. Do you have anything like that? And she's like, oh, I hear you out. And then what, 3-4 weeks later, boom, there's an intentional like social media, anti-social media class, right? And so like she gets that though, because she trusts us as the experts, not her as the content developer or the educational expert that she is, but she trusts us. And I think that there's very few places that trust their user deeply enough to be the expert and really trust that whatever they say, you can design, right? Like Walt Disney could not do engineering, but he told us, hey, can you build a boat ride that goes up and then through all this stuff? They're like, it's pretty crazy, but yeah, great. Build it, right? And so like he was the expert on fun. He wasn't the expert on building things. He was the expert on fun. And that's how Disneyland and Disney World came to be so amazing, because the person who developed it was the expert on fun. And that's what we go there for. We don't go there to see the marvel of the engineering. I mean, that's great, right? But that's not what brings thousands and thousands of people through those gates every day and crying when you have to leave. The fun and the magic is what does that. And so I think if we as creators can be more trusting of our users as experts, then we will create something that they will keep coming back for, because it's what they wanted. My final word.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. G. Thank you, Dr. Beasely. This has been a wonderful, fruitful conversation. I hope you will take this and bring peace to the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. As I always say, stand in your experience. And I thank you all for coming. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Beasely.
Thank you for inviting
Thank
me.
you.
It's been fascinating. Thank you all.
Bye,
Thanks so much.
Thank you.